So I have some concerns about the mass deportation policies, and I really wanted to start composing something that is not only very informative, but also has several potential practical guides. Um, Originally, this was all going to be one essay, but as I'm getting into it, I think I'm already to a length of like 15 pages in the rough draft, and there's still so much that I need to add. So we're going to split it up, and we're going to split it up into, I don't even know how many sections quite yet, but I'm going to try to be expedient in releasing each of these. However, I will be, requiring a certain level of quality. Like I'm not going to really rush anything out. So yeah, let's just start. We need to talk about ICE knock and talks, and the danger facing every U.S. citizen, even legal residents who were born into this country. There are just a lot of parallels to certain dark points in history that we're going to address later. But for now, in part one, this is just going to be an introduction. We'll briefly educate, prove that this mass deportation policy cannot be to benefit the economy. We will cover what rights are recognized in the US as well as what rights are recognized in terms of international law. We will cover what to do during ICE knock and talks when the agents follow the law. We will cover what you can do in situations when ICE agents break the law. And we will cover how to navigate ICE in the context of martial law. Beyond these practical guides, we will get into resistance movements, the history and philosophy of them, as well as the extent to which policymakers can perpetuate violence. Finally, we will go over a basic plan to attempt to abolish ICE, or at least apply serious pressure to, as well as abolish privatized prisons and successfully reform the 13th Amendment to protect incarcerated people from enslavement. Now, if you're someone who thinks these mass deportations are done to economically benefit U.S. citizens, I need you to understand why this policy is not economic, is not necessary. And I want to get you there quick. First, I must mention something before we get into the numbers. The legal immigration application procedure usually takes 8 to 13 years to complete. In terms of asylum seekers, if you and your family were in a brutal and life-threatening situation, you would want to leave it. And you certainly wouldn't cross your fingers and wait 8 to 13 years waiting for a yes or no. Enduring direct threat to you and your family for 8 or more years is not a strategy that you would accept. I need you to understand that if your living situation was one where you were unsure if violence could befall you or your loved ones on any given day, and you felt your family would be safer somewhere else, you would absolutely seek asylum somewhere as a refugee, even if it were illegal. You, yes, you, would break laws if your conditions were different. Crime is not a simple black and white moral failing. Crime arises from living conditions and is often a response to environmental factors. You and your family would understand it. They would understand it was necessary to break laws for safety. And people like me would understand and respect you for breaking laws that prevent you from keeping your family safe, so long as your actions did not brutalize non-combatants. Okay, let's get into it. You've been told the mass deportations are being done for economic benefit of the working class. And you may have already been tempted to click off because you don't want to hear any lefty, libtard snowflake's opinion. But good news, you don't have to. Numbers can't have an agenda. Mathematics can't lie. So let's play with the numbers and see where the priorities are. According to AmericanImmigrationCouncil.org, the border wall, just the cost of construction, was $15 billion in Trump's first term. Actually, one last thing. I have to point out that undocumented immigrants cannot apply for government assistance because they are not citizens. This means that the following statistics apply almost exclusively to their children who were born within the U.S. and therefore are citizens. According to the Center for Immigration Studies, the fiscal drain of the average undocumented immigrant household is $5,692 per year. Again, that is the amount of welfare going to things like school lunches for the children who were born here in the U.S. from undocumented parents. So get your calculator. We type in the cost of the border wall. That's 15,000,000,000,000, and divide it by the average fiscal loss. That is 5,692. What we get is 2,635,277. That's the number of, in terms of households, families of U.S.-born children who could have been aided for 1 year on the cost of the border wall's construction alone. Keep out your calculator, it's going to get much worse. According to taxpayerstatistics.org, there were 11 million undocumented immigrants as of 2022. As of 2021, there were 5.4 million active ITINs. This means almost half of the undocumented immigrants still filed with the IRS and paid federal, state, and local taxes. Again, for benefits they themselves are not eligible for, but their U.S.-born children are. According to the Institute of Taxation and Economic Policy, in 2022, undocumented immigrants paid a total of $59.4 billion to the federal government in taxes. So back to the calculator. We type in the amount of undocumented immigrants voluntarily paying to the U.S. government, or rather the taxes that they generate, 5,940,000,000, and divide that by the fiscal drain of the average undocumented household, that is 5,692, we get 1,043,569. That's the number of undocumented households whose fiscal drain were just covered by other undocumented immigrants. Again, that's households, not people. Keep in mind that there were still 5.6 million undocumented immigrants who did not pay taxes in 2021. If they were accepted as documented immigrants, they would be paying taxes as well, enough to cover another roughly 1 million households. So if you've never asked the following question, I hope it sticks in your mind as I ask you today. Wouldn't it be better, instead of funding ICE to deport people, we used that money to hire people in the process of legal immigration, so we could get more of the immigrants documented faster, and therefore paying taxes faster? Wouldn't there be a real return on investment there? Wouldn't that be a better economic policy? I think you know my answer to that question. It's an obvious and resounding yes. So the next question that begs to be asked is, what's the average annual expenditure of ICE? Let me rephrase that. What is the average fiscal drain to the taxpayer every year for the existence of ICE? According to the Department of Homeland Security, ICE had a budget of $8.66 billion in 2023. And according to the Government Accountability Office, ICE has been consistently over budget since 2014. Here in 2025, according to NPR journalist Zemina Bustillo, who specializes in reporting on immigration policy, the Department of Homeland Security has proposed an immigration enforcement bill that is projected to cost $26.9 billion in the first year alone. Put a pin in that. We'll play with the calculator soon. According to ICE's own website, they have 128 detention centers as of 2023. I'd be willing to bet that number will increase, as more detention centers will be needed to hold the high concentration of human beings forced into them. If this sounds familiar, you might want to consider how you feel about the US government using your tax dollars to build concentration camps. Let's address one last thing regarding the narrative of undocumented immigrants being economic parasites. Since immigrants not having the proper paperwork to work over the table, so to speak, they must work under the table. This means A, they are paid in cash, and B, they are making minimum wage or less, bringing less than $30,000 a year to their households. Being paid only in cash means that the transactions they make in the community stays 100% in that community until something is purchased from a chain store or that cash is deposited in a bank. Every time you and I use a debit card, a portion of that transaction is siphoned out of our community and to the bank. That means digital purchases, especially online ones to massive companies, are more detrimental to the local economy than any cash transaction within it could be. You may not have considered this before, but when you buy from a chain store, that money goes toward the expansion of the company. The only part of that money that returns to the local economy is in the form of wages. But the wages are a fraction of what is spent. If you are looking for the parasites siphoning wealth from your community, start looking at nationwide chains, banks, and places you shop online. Now, about making less than $30,000 a year. According to Forbes, the current average rent in the US is $1,372 per month. That's $16,464 per year. The average cost of groceries for one person in the US is $261 to $497 according to Jack Flynn. Let's average these two numbers and we get $379 a month. So that's the grocery cost for a year is $4,548. Those two expenses alone make up just over $21,000. I assume I don't have to tell you that there are a plethora of other expenses that arise in one year. So I hope it stands to reason with you that their money disappears into living expenses. They really don't have much left, if any at all, for them to siphon it out of the local economy in the form of remittances. However, the housing firms they pay rent to likely siphon a significant amount of money out of your local economy, whether the tenant inside is native-born or undocumented. Again, if you are looking for parasites devastating your local economy, look for rent-seeking behaviors and you will find no shortage of parasites, I'm sure. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, SNAP spent $112 billion in 2023 serving 42.1 million people. That's $2,660 per person helped. That proposed ICE budget of $26.9 billion could be spent in SNAP to help 10,112,781 food insecure people get the nutrition that they need. According to Patrick Boyle, deportation flights cost over $17,000 for every hour they're in the air. Using our $379 average for monthly grocery cost, that's enough to buy a person food for over 44 months. 1 hour of flying or 44 months worth of food. Do we really want to be in a society that lets people starve and builds concentration camps instead? I almost forgot the most important math of this. If we take that average fiscal drain of a undocumented household of 5,692 and multiply that by 11 million, that is 11,000,000, we get the number 62,612,000,000. So again, that's all of the undocumented immigrant households. That's the entire fiscal drain of all projected 11 million to be in the country. And that means 62.6 billion. Again, half of the immigrants are covering, where is that? Let me scroll up. with the 5.4 million ITINs. Yeah, so they contributed 59.4 billion. So the fiscal drain with the in terms of the entirety. So we'll subtract that. So here's the 62.6 billion minus the 59.4. So that's 594,000,000,000 equals, we have a disparity of 3,212,000,000. Again, this is just off the 5.4 when there are 5.6 other immigrants that, if they were documented, could be paying taxes and contributing another roughly 60 billion, just like this other 59.4. So this is basically not even an economic problem at all. Just in terms of the total amount of tax dollars that the United States gets. And as I just said earlier, instead of wasting money like this is 3.2 billion. The ICE budget exceeds that. So there's no reason for ICE to exist, just in terms of looking at the budget. ICE has a larger fiscal drain than the illegal immigrants do, all 11 million of them, even though half of them aren't paying taxes. So abolish ICE, put that money toward getting people safely documented and into the system, and they can be paying taxes, and we can have this deficit change to something where it's just an all-out gain. But that's that. That's part one. I will see you soon.